This is Gospel Music Today, and it's a great pleasure to be talking to someone that you may remember from one of the very first concerts at Shepherd of the Valley Church. This is Mark Blackwood of the Blackwood Gospel Quartet. Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, hey, Ken, it's good to see you again. Good to be back up in New England, and we were one of the first groups that you had at the church.
That's right.
That's wonderful. What a blessing.
Yeah, that was a great night.
We had a great time.
Now, as soon as we hear the name Blackwood, we need to know a little bit about your connection with the original Blackwood Brothers Quartet.
I love sharing it every opportunity that I get. My family, the Blackwood Brothers, started singing gospel music way back in 1934 in the hills of Choctaw County, Mississippi. The original quartet consisted of my grandfather, Roy Blackwood. He was a tenor singer. My Uncle James was a lead singer. My Uncle R.W. was the baritone. And my Uncle Doyle was the bass singer. That was the four that got the Blackwood Brothers started, and God bless those four, bless their radio shows, their recordings, and all down through the years, any success, any great things that happened to the Blackwood Brothers, we owe it to my grandfather and uncles for getting everything started way back when, and they had no help. It was just them and the Lord against the world, it seems like.
That's right. Now, your father, what's the connection?
Well, in June 30th, 1954, the Blackwood Brothers had a horrible plane crash in Clanton, Alabama. They were just scheduled to sing at the Peach Festival along with the Statesman Quartet. The Statesman drove up from Atlanta in their Cadillac limousine, and R.W. Blackwood flew the airplane in for the Blackwood Brothers. Nobody knows exactly what happened, but on the second landing of the airplane in Clanton, Alabama, June 30th, 1954, the plane crashed in Clanton on the runway, and my uncle R.W. was tragically killed, along with our bass singer Bill Lyles. And my Uncle James thought about never singing for God again. He was going to disband the quartet. He was the last original member still singing, and when R.W. was killed, it was so hurtful. It was a horrible thing for my family to go through in the gospel music world, but God spoke to my Uncle James's heart. God reminded Uncle James of the work that he started in 1934, and God reminded James he had more singing to be done. So he put the Blackwood Brothers back together after that horrible plane crash. They brought J.D. Sumner in to sing the bass. They looked around for a short while and decided real quick on him. He had been singing with the Sunshine Boys. And then they looked around. They finally decided on R.W.'s younger brother. He was 19 years old. He was green, naive, never traveled, never been anywhere, kind of introverted, you know. He was my daddy. My daddy, Cecil Blackwood, joined the Blackwood Brothers in 1954, sang the baritone, sang the gospel for 46 years, the baritone singer for the Blackwood Brothers. He went to be with the Lord November the 13th in the year 2000, and we miss him every day. We miss him. We can't hardly stand it. We miss him every day.
Yeah. Now, they were one of the only groups to travel by plane back then, and they were one of the first groups to travel by bus, weren't they?
Now, that is true. R.W. decided it would be a good idea for the quartet to fly to their engagements. So many people were asking them to come and sing. They couldn't make all their engagements by driving, so they bought their own airplane. Matter of fact, before it was all over, they had 3 airplanes, and the last plane they bought was the big twin Beechcraft airplane that they bought. It was the biggest plane that they had. That's the plane that tragically crashed in Clanton, Alabama. I think Urias Lefevre might have got an airplane about the same time, but the Blackwood Brothers were basically the first people to travel in an airplane. And then a few years later, when J.D. Sumner was in the Blackwood Brothers, he suggested the idea of, let's get a bus. Nobody else is doing that. These big buses, they're better than riding in these cars. So they kind of made fun of him, laughed at him. I think Bill Shaw said, yeah, let's get a boat. We can go up down the river that way. My daddy said, yeah, let's get a train. We're going to have our own train card. But they did decide to get a bus, and J.D. fixed it up and made that happen. And today, when you see all these groups traveling down the road in these big buses and everything, they owe it all to J.D. Sumner, because he was the first one, the idea, and the Blackwood Brothers to get their own bus and to customize it and travel that way.
Yeah. And that bus is at the museum in Dollywood.
That is a replica of the bus. They couldn't find that bus. They looked for it and they couldn't find it, but it's just like it, though. Down to the paint job, to the brown recliner chairs inside the bus. It's a perfect replica, but it's not the original, but it's just like it. And it's really touching to see that bus there.
Now, how did you become involved in professional gospel singing?
Well, I couldn't help it. My grandfather was, the original tenor singer for the Blackwood Brothers, and my daddy was the baritone singer for the Blackwood Brothers for 46 years, and all my uncles and everybody in gospel music. I just seemed like I didn't have a choice, but I loved it. Growing up in gospel music, Or with my daddy being in the Blackwood Brothers, every weekend I would travel with the quartet. I grew up in the wings of the auditoriums watching the Statesmen and the Blackwood Brothers, and that's all I've ever wanted to do. My daddy always said he wanted to be a preacher or a singer when he was growing up. I knew what I wanted. I wanted to be a gospel singer ever since 10 years old. And when I was 10, actually 8 years old, myself and my cousin Billy Blackwood, we put our first quartet together called the Blackwood Little Brothers. Now we sang and traveled that way, and I produced records, and I've won Grammy Awards for records I produced, and I had publishing companies and worked as a manager for other people. But this is my first love, singing gospel music, just like my daddy, just like my grandpa.
We know it's a tough road, but it's a wonderful career, isn't it?
It is. It's a truly blessing to see people when they're blessed and touched, when people are wiping tears from their eyes when we're singing those songs, and when we see people come to know the Lord. It's a wonderful thing, and that is the reward. We hate leaving our families, and we sure hate it when our buses break down to Kansas City and we got to fly to New England. We hate that. Well, we don't hate it, but it's just something to overcome sometime. But the rewards are by far more than the setbacks that we have to endure sometimes.
Now, we have a video from the 2005 Grand Old Gospel Reunion with Blackwood Reunion in it. Tell us about that.
Well, Charlie Waller wanted us to put the Blackwood Brothers back together for a special event, and we did. My cousin Jimmy, who is James Blackwood Sr.'s oldest son, and myself, we sang with Bill Shaw, who sang the tenor for the Blackwood Brothers for many years, Big John Hall, and we did a Blackwood Brothers reunion. Had a great time. It was great. People received it well. So many people we hadn't seen in a long time. They came to the Grand Old Gospel Reunion to see the Blackwood Brothers, and it was great to be a part of that, and I hope we get to do it again sometime.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's been a great pleasure to have you on the program.
Ken, it's good to see you again. God bless you.
And we'll be looking forward to the next time.
All right.
Now back to more great Southern gospel music on Gospel Music Today.